by being exposed to severe frosty conditions. So species is one thing you need to think about. Probably the other most significant thing to think about is your growing medium. Now, if you think back to February, which was our first school session together, and a lot of the things that we talked about, what makes a good growing medium a good growing medium. Having a free draining nature is an absolutely critical part of what we think bonsai ought to be grown in. And again, to some extent, you know, it perhaps doesn't matter too much what the growing medium comprises, i.e. what's in it. Although again, there are some components in a growing mix which will provide much better insulation than others. If you recall, we talked about the fact that in some places where they don't experience winter and grow bonsai, they're able to grow their bonsai in pure grit. But pure grit is not good for the British climate because stone is a good conductor of heat, therefore it's also a very good conductor of cold. So if your bonsai are in pure grit, then they're going to drain pretty well, but they're going to get very little insulation from the cold. But the free draining nature is really, really important, because if we get very severe frost and your root ball tucked up within your fairly small bonsai pot is full of something like peat or loam soil, holding lots and lots of water from an autumn like we've had, which, you know, the reason we can't put the trees on Ian's lawn like we did last time is because it's sopping wet. If we do, and this is what they're saying, we're going to get some cold weather very soon. Those pots out there, if they're holding too much water, they're going to still be holding too much water when the frost comes. And you think about all that water in the growing mix, all surrounding those lovely little fine fibrous roots that the tree grew this year. If all that water turns to ice and remains as ice for 2-3 weeks, the physical damage to those fine roots is going to be really significant. Possibly enough to kill the tree. Certainly enough to damage a proportion of the roots sufficiently that the tree will not grow as well next year as you would like it to do. Again, I'm sorry if I keep on emphasizing things. We are always looking for optimum growth from our bonsai. We want to make significant progress with our bonsai. We don't want to take 10 years to do something we could do in 5. So we want to take every conceivable measure we can to actually get optimum growth each year. And optimum growth will be different for our different trees with a different objective. And if you get half the roots killed off this winter, you're going to get probably not even half the growth next year. The relationship is as direct as that. You lose half your roots during the course of this winter coming, then you're going to have half the growth that you would have. That's assuming the tree stays alive. So, very free draining mixes have been criticised, and I think, again, looking back to February, I told you about a mistake I made in Scotland where I didn't warn people about this. That you'll have to water. Even in our climate, you're going to have to water a lot more in the summer, spring and summer, with a very, very free draining mix. But believe you me, that's worth it, because in a winter period like apparently coming up and the 2 we've experienced, your very free draining mix is going to go into the start of the winter with very little water being retained. And I'm not saying you won't get any root damage, because you may well still get some root damage, but it'll be absolutely minimal. So your tree is going to come out of the winter no matter how bad it is. Bearing in mind that you're also thinking about other factors, not just the free draining nature of the growing medium, as we've already said, different species. But you take the necessary steps, and with a bit of luck, you're going to get your trees through and out the other side, ready to start next year in a pretty good state of affairs. So it's worth pointing out also when we think about the vulnerability of our roots, the roots of our trees to cold, frosty conditions. Unfortunately, that's one way in which our lovely ceramic pots do not help us at all, because like stone, ceramic is a very good conductor of heat, therefore it is a very good conductor of cold. So cold strikes through a ceramic pot very easily. I mean, we're not talking about pots breaking here, we're talking about the cold air, the temperature being transferred via the pot to the roots. So that's another thing that's, where, the guy that I was telling you about with the bubble wrap around his pot was giving that bit of extra insulation. One of the reasons, I'm not suggesting that you put all your trees into plastic or mica pots, but I'm particularly seeing as, I've got the ceramic pots out there that I need you to buy. But that is one advantage of the mica pot that I'm talking about, not really the thin plastic pot I'm talking there, but you've all seen mica pots, which are a composite plastic material, virtually unbreakable, not so easily got nowadays actually, because they were all made in Korea and hardly anybody buys from Korea now. But the one good thing, apart from their unbreakable nature, was the fact that mica pots are actually quite good insulators for the roots, really. So again, just kind of bear in mind that all the factors that are going to make a tree vulnerable or otherwise to cold conditions. What is the actual physical shape of the pot? Now that's another big relevant factor. If you've got a very shallow pot with a really big surface area, and it's brilliant for water evaporating in conditions where there's too much rainfall, but it is an area that allows the roots to be much more exposed to really cold air. And of course a very shallow pot is also providing very little protection for the roots also. So, a tree in a big shallow oval ceramic pot, even with a good free draining mix, it's probably a little bit more vulnerable than something in a short, squat, deep ceramic pot, where there's much smaller surface area of soil to be exposed to the cold. There's a greater depth of growing medium for the roots to be in. Now, again, just think about it. If we pick up anything from today, a little talk about winter protection, then it's look at your collection of trees and do what you can. Now, if you've got a garden full of trees all growing in peat with a little bit of grit mixed in, I'm afraid there's no way you can do anything about that now. I mean, you obviously can't repot them now, otherwise you really will kill them. But it's just something to think about for the future. That that's one of the main reasons that we bang on all the time about free draining, open, airy mixes, so that they're not going into the start of the winter absolutely soaking wet.
Peter, I tend to bring my plants into the garage for winter protection, and being conscious of obviously not being too wet. How do you judge how dry they can be without them getting damaged?
Well, the fundamental thing to remember is that that under no circumstances whatsoever do any of your trees want to be bone dry. However, all of our deciduous trees, and of course they're going to have, deciduous means they're not going to have any leaves on during the period that we're talking about, will actually, they're not growing at all, they've got leaves, they can't grow. So the roots themselves are not absorbing a great deal of water. There is almost, but not quite, no transpiration taking place. Normally you'll be aware that the surface of the leaves allow transpiration of water. In fact, that's how the whole system of the tree livelihood works, really, is transpiration of water from the leaves, that water being replaced by the roots, providing that kind of circulation in a way, really. Not quite, though, because all trees are capable of transpiring a bit through openings in the bark, which are called lenticels. Actually, I was thinking about this a little bit yesterday on the way over, that I might mention lenticels. It's not lentils like you might put in your soup, although they're probably very good. I'm a little bit, not being a botanist, I'm a little bit out of my depth here, but I was wondering whether some of the trees that have been seen to be particularly vulnerable to the severe winters we've been seeing might possibly be trees that transpire water through their lenticels more readily than others. But then, and as I begin to say this, I'm thinking, yeah, I should have taken the other option, which was not to mention it at all, because I really do find myself out of my depth here. This is a roundabout way of saying that I can't tell you how to judge how wet to keep your trees. I mean, you just have to make up your mind to make some judgment on the basis of knowing yourself that they never want to be bone dry, but you don't want to keep them sopping wet the whole time. And to some extent, your decisions on that are going to depend on the species of tree. Now, it's very interesting you mentioned that, because I sort of overlooked the fact that we need to also think about the difference between deciduous trees and evergreen trees through the winter months, because pretty much all our deciduous trees with no leaves on during the winter, the one significant factor that really helps us with those trees in terms of protecting them is that they no longer need any light at all for the whole of the duration of the winter with no leaves on. So you can provide them with some protection in any way almost that garage, shed, basement of the house. There are lots of ways really. Bearing in mind that no light is required, the tree will be perfectly happy, and it will lose very little moisture. So my suggestion is that if you give them a water prior to bringing them into a garage or something like that, then the chances are, for the duration of the winter, you're probably not going to have to water them again. But that's quite a dangerous thing to say to people, because if they think, well, that Peter Snart said they're not going to need any water, so you don't even look at them, and actually they do dry out, then it takes very little for those very fine fibrous roots to dry out. But for instance, from about now on, we won't water any of the outdoor trees at all. We will still go on watering the trees in the greenhouses, because we stop the greenhouses from getting frozen, and of course they can get pretty warm when the sun comes out. That's something to bear in mind also, again, about protecting your trees in a greenhouse, is that they can get pretty warm on a winter's day when the sun comes out.